If you feel like your life has stalled, if you keep telling yourself I'll start tomorrow, if every evening is swallowed or disappears into scrolling on your phone, Netflix, YouTube, some form of entertainment or junk food, or whatever abyss of escapism it is, I don't think you're lazy. I think you've ultimately trained your brain to choose escape over progress. And that's what I want to talk about today in this video. Because I don't think cheap dopamine is ruining people's lives. I think avoidance is. Now, ultimately, cheap dopamine is just the vehicle in which avoidance travels on. Most people are not lazy, they're overstimulated. Their brains have become used to a reward without effort, so normal life starts to feel dull. Training feels extraordinarily hard, building a business feels impossible. Reading a book feels hard. Working on yourself feels hard. Even just sitting quietly with no distractions, with your own thoughts feels uncomfortable. And not necessarily because all those things are bad, it's just because your brain has become so used to constant stimulation. Now, dopamine in and of itself is not the enemy. We all need dopamine. Dopamine is absolutely fine in and of itself. The kind that feels good for a few minutes but quietly leaves you worse off afterwards is the problem. The problem is the easy reward. Instant gratification, scrolling, porn, endless videos, junk food, gaming for hours, checking your phone every 30 seconds. None of these things are evil in and of themselves or on their own. The danger is when they become your default state, your default response to discomfort. Because ultimately that's when it stops becoming entertainment. I've said before in a previous video, if you watch a film every now and again, that's absolutely fine. But if you're watching nine episodes of a series, that's no longer entertainment. That's avoiding your life. That's a big level of escapism. And I know because I've done it myself. I've sat down to edit a YouTube video or work on a painting, then thought, I'll just check my phone. And 20 minutes later, I find myself thinking, what the heck am I doing? We've all been there and we all do it. Now, I've trained myself to have positive mental strategies to overcome this, and I find myself doing it less and less and less. And, by glory, I feel much better for doing so. The worst part isn't losing that time, it's losing trust in yourself, because deep down that what just happened. You avoided the thing you said you were going to do, and this is where the diminishing self-trust occurs. And that's why I think this conversation or this video is really about self-respect, because cheap dopamine doesn't just waste your time, it damages and changes how you respect yourself. Every time you choose easy pleasure over something you promised yourself all day long, you quietly tell yourself, I don't do what I say I'm going to do. And repeat that often enough, you eventually believe it. You stop seeing yourself as someone who can stick to their word, someone who's disciplined, someone, who you become someone who says they'll start every Monday and never actually do get going with anything. Someone with ideas but no proof. Someone who always says about to change their life, not actually changing their life. And I think what's scary about all of this is that wasting your life rarely looks dramatic. It just happens, and it looks ordinary. An hour of scrolling here, an hour of Netflix there, an hour of YouTube here, an hour of gaming there, another takeaway, another promise broken, another month where nothing really changes, no progress is made. Then suddenly a year's gone by. Your bank account looks the same, your unfinished projects are still unfinished, your confidence has quietly disappeared. And not because one huge thing happened, it's just the accumulation of the compounding effect of hundreds of tiny decisions. People often say they're addicted to dopamine. I don't think that's the case. I think they're addicted to escaping discomfort. Feeling lonely, open your phone. Feeling stressed, eat something. Feeling uncertain, well, watch another video. Feeling bored, distract yourself, reopen a game. The feeling comes first and the habit follows, which is ultimately the building block of diminishing self-respect, diminishing your ability to make progress. I think deleting apps rarely fixes the problem, because you'll just download a new app. If you don't deal with the discomfort itself, your brain will just find another way of escapism. I think there is a big difference between actually resting and avoidance. Rest restores you. You need to rest. Avoidance drains you. After a real rest, you feel, ready to go again. After avoidance, life somehow feels even heavier. Most people already know this. Most people already know the difference. They're just uncomfortable admitting which one they're actually choosing. The people who change their lives are not necessarily more motivated. They're simply better at sitting with discomfort. They're willing to be bored. They're willing to work without applause. They're willing to upload videos and get 0 views. They're willing to paint on another canvas that might never sell. They're willing to build a business which might take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 years to actually start generating a sustainable income. That's because they understand something most people don't. Real life is generally slow. Getting strong is slow. Building money is slow. Growing a YouTube channel is slow. Becoming a better father, partner, person is slow. Everything worthwhile generally takes longer than what your brain wants it to do. If you're constantly chasing instant reward, instant gratification, then you're never actually going to build that discipline to allow slow progress to turn into something meaningful over time. Slow progress will just feel like a failure to you. And this is why this ties into my video yesterday, because this is why so many people quit so early. They say they're going to do something, do it for 2 minutes, then put it back down. And now, the answer to all of this isn't just becoming extreme and waking up at 2 a.m, and going for a run, going for a 15-mile run, and then having 1,000 eggs for breakfast and, making $7 million before you've had a chance to go defecate into your lavatory. That's not the answer. The extremism is not the answer. You don't need to throw your phone away. You don't need to live like a monk. You don't need to go to the mountains. You don't need to do some massively drastic thing. Yeah, you don't need to remove the pleasures from your life. You just need to build a better order. Effort first, reward after. Train first, then relax. Create first, then consume. Clean your room, then watch some Netflix. Handle your business, handle your responsibilities, then enjoy yourself. And this one shift can change everything, because you're no longer rewarding avoidance, you're rewarding progress. And earned reward feels different. Food tastes better after training. Rest feels better after work. Entertainment feels better when you've actually earned it. When you've been slugging away all week, sticking a movie on, having a bag of popcorn feels absolutely fantastic. But if you're doing that every day, morning, noon and evening, then it's probably not going to feel so good, because ultimately it comes with peace instead of guilt. So how do you actually change? First, I think ultimately it all starts with you being honest with yourself and accepting your behaviors. You've got to be honest about your biggest escape, whether it's scrolling on your phone. Everyone has one, whether it's scrolling on your phone, whether it's food, alcohol, gaming, some addiction of some form or another. Constantly messaging people because you can't sit alone, constantly looking at your phone. Just ask yourself this one question, what do I run towards when I don't want to face what's directly in front of me, meaning you? What do you run towards when you don't want to sit with the discomfort of just being quiet? And this is where the real work begins. I think another thing you can do is to learn to delay the urge. Not forever, just for 10 minutes. When you feel like reaching for your phone, just wait. Sit with the boredom, sit with the discomfort. Teach your brain that ultimately every uncomfortable feeling doesn't need instant escape. Just sit with the feeling for a moment, and that small amount of discipline can build a lot more than you realize. Then after this, you have to replace the habit. So whatever it is that you did, just replace it with something more positive. So whether it's scrolling on your phone, go for a walk. Whether it's watching endless stuff on YouTube, clean your room. Write something down in a book. Do one workout, even if it's 10 squats and 10 press-ups, all in sets of 1. Do one squat, take a 30-second rest, then another squat, depending on your level of fitness. Cook a decent meal. Create something, because momentum feels better than mindless consumption ever will. You have to make your environment work for you. This is the last thing I'm going to say on today's video. You have to make your environment work for you. You have to build somewhat of a control center, because willpower is overrated. You can't just will yourself into success. You've got to have, you can have all the willpower in the world, but if you don't have a decent plan, if you don't have the environment, if you don't have the behaviors which allow you to actually make progress, then willpower is just willpower. If your phone is still beside you, you'll still probably check it. If your junk food is still in your cupboards, you're probably still going to eat it. If every distraction is simply one tap or click away, you're probably going to tap it or click it. So, don't rely solely on just being stronger. Make the temptation less convenient by curating your environment to actually allow for your progress and your new behavior patterns to form. And, underneath all of this, I think there is a harder truth. A lot of people escape because they don't enjoy the life they're living. And I've been there, so I know. They don't like their job, they don't like their body, they don't like their habits, they don't like the direction that they're heading in, so they distract themselves. But the distraction keeps them trapped inside the life they're trying to avoid, which is it's a dichotomy. It's just a circle. Distracting yourself just to stay trapped in the life that you're trying to avoid. This is a cycle, which the more you escape your life, the less you enjoy it. The less you enjoy it, essentially. And the more you want to escape, at some point you have to break that cycle. You have to pop the bubble. And it's not one massive thing, like I've said before. It's small, steady steps. One workout, one honest conversation, probably with yourself to begin with. 1 hour of focused work, one video uploaded, one page written, and ultimately keeping a promise to yourself on a daily basis. As small as it is, it's going to matter big time, because this is essentially how you start to rebuild self-respect, not through motivation, through evidence. Every time you choose the harder path, you collect the proof that you can actually trust yourself again. And 5 years from now, you won't remember the videos you scrolled past. You won't remember the evening that you spent avoiding your life. You're not going to remember the Netflix series. It might be good in the moment. In 5 years from now, you're not going to remember that donut you ate. In 5 years from now, you're not going to remember half the menial things that occurred, half of the methods of avoidance that you were entertaining. You won't remember another pointless hour scrolling on your phone. But you will live with the choices that built that person every single day. You've got to cast the vote to become for the person that you want to be. So stop rewarding yourself for avoiding your life. Build one that's actually worth paying attention to. Effort first, reward after. And that's how you stop wasting your life on cheap dopamine. I'm Jake O'Neill. This is Jake O'Neill UK. Thank you very much for watching. Like, share, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.